This stuff here, Yerushalmi Shekalim, the article Ozvar edition, where Daf Hayim Rav, right after the Mishnah, the third line down, which in the Vilna is on Daf Gimel Rav, right after the Mishnah about Halacha Beis, Rabbi Yehuda. So in the Mishnah, we talk about them uproot how they used to go around, uproot the Kilayim, which is we're going in the fields. Tani, Rabbi Yehuda, well, Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah, well, I guess we should go back and read that. He said, where's the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda ben Yerushalmi Okrim Mashlich Lifneim. Mishnah would be oker and uproot the Kilayim and toss it in front of them, and then they change it. Okay, so now the Brisa elaborates on that. That's the head of the Mishnah. Tani Rabbi Yehuda Rishonei Okrim Mashlich Lifneim. They uproot the Kilayim and they would toss it in front of them in the field. For you smechim shtei smachos. The owners of these fields of Kilayim would rejoice with two joys. First, that they would be hoeing their fields. They'd be moving the weeds, because the Kilayim were weeds. And the other was they had no from the Kilayim, because the Kilayim, whatever was uprooted, they used as animal fodder. So, no problem. When there became more people who were violating this prohibition of Kilayim, so then they decided, okay, we have to change this, because obviously there's not enough of a penalty here. They would cast them on the roads. Okay, so they could no longer use the presumably they really got run over or trodden upon, and they couldn't give their animals anymore. So they lost that advantage. But still, still they're happy. Shemnakshi was still the same, because their fields were getting hoed, the weeds were getting taken out. So says Gemara, fine, they have to make another stage. They decided to make the entire field hefker. Okay, this brings us to a very fundamental question. How do we know hefker based on hefker? I know the hefker based has the right to come and deprive you of your ownership, this kind of eminent domain of your field. Minan hefker based hefker. There's the chsiv, because it says, Kol she'evel l'shloshes yomim. There's a pasuk in Ezra. Anyway, what's going to come to a great conclave? They're making Yerushalayim at the end of 3 days. Ka'atzas hasorim as kanim, according to the council of the officials and the elders. Yachom kol rechusha. All of his property will be seized. He himself will be removed from the congregation, which came up from the Golus at the time of Binyan Ba'asheni. So we see that you can Basin can seize your property. They can take it away from you. Hefker Basin Hefker. Gemara says, Minai Shibtu Minai Maisrus. How we know that that Hefker is part of Minai Maisrus? In other words, anything which goes Hefker with ownership is exempt from Maisrus. I know when Basin takes away your ownership, also whatever grows afterwards is considered part of Minai Maisrus. How we know that? We might say, I guess, that, well, at this point, Basin really theoretically owns it. So maybe it's Chayiv and Maisrus, because there is an ownership involved. It's under Basin's jurisdiction. No, how do we know that the status of this field is right now Hefker? It's the same status as ownerless, even though Basin has a jurisdiction over it. It's not considered to be an ownership jurisdiction. So Rabbi Yosef Bar Acha Shema Min Adah. He learned it from here. And it's interesting derivation. It's not direct. Kind of indirect. So the Raya is from Shemitah. So Rabbi Yosef Bar Yitzchak Bar Acha Shema Min Adah. You derive from here. You can't make an Iber Yor, meaning add a month to the year, not during Shemitah and not during Motzei Shemitah, not the first year of the new cycle. If you did make it, Chazal, the Sanhedrin, did make it a leap year and they added a month, it's Muberes. It's going to be a leap month. And it's valid, and the year is a 13-month year. So, this additional month, which Chazal add, isn't a part from Mises, because it's not Daraisa. Daraisa Shemitah is 12 months. Chazal came along and said, no, we're making it a 13-month year. So they're adding a month to the year. So they're adding an additional month. That additional month, they're exempting like all of Shemitah from Maasros. So you see, Hefker based in, they made Hefker and exempts from Meiser. That's a fascinating proof. So my cousin, the Ofer Yerushalmi, points out the Rabbi Yosef Engel in the Obama staff Peites in the Peites in the Gilui Hashas asked that Tzarachin Rayazos. This proof requires analysis. The Shamarei Nasa Korach based in Labra Shana, because the basin has a specific authorization to make leap years. Even if they do it deliberately where it's not warranted. Also, what they have that is authorized. Mikra datem can have a chodesh alushvis me'atera. So that's not really hefker based. Came shmita midoraisa. The Shabbat protested about the remaises, and it's of course it's part of the chodesh. He doesn't really give an answer to the question. So I guess you have to say something along the lines that, well, you see that Basin has authority over over all sorts of things, including authority over what's exempt or obligated Meiser, and therefore, even though it's not exactly the same thing, but it's an authority they have. They can determine the status of something from Meisers. It requires more analysis. Okay, so says we're Akadun Shemitah. I understand why you shouldn't make leap year during Shemitah, because you're extending the prohibition of Shemitah. With all that are those issues. But Motzei Shvis, why not make a leap year Motzei Shvis? Rabbi Vun said, Shol Rabbos Yisr Chodesh. So you shouldn't, the Yisr Chodesh extend extra months because Adar is before the Korban Omer, which is brought in this one. So therefore it's an extra month, which are also to eat for new grain. So it's going to lead to more starvation and more difficulty to find grain. So Gemara says, Revo said, that this is true. Actually, before Rebbe permitted bringing vegetation from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, then they would only use stuff which grew in Eretz Yisrael, and of course, they couldn't during Shemitah to take an extra month. It would be a problem. Why they only use stuff from Eretz Yisrael? So the Mepharshim explained, the Korban Eda, Takli Chadatin, that Chashash Shem Yiblemem Gush Offer Meretz Amim Shemetami B'Mago Matzi Tami Tarsher. So, because Mirabon there goes a tumor on the dirt of Chutz La'aretz, and we're afraid that you bring a clump of dirt in from Chutz La'aretz, so it's Bitami the Peros and the Yerakos and everything else in Eretz Yisrael. It's Bitami B'Mago B'Masa, by touching even by carrying. So therefore, initially they refrained from bringing in Peros Yerakos from Chutz La'aretz. That's to bring in also. This is actually you see Rocco's here, but I think it's also Peros, but maybe not because it's going to gush a clump of dirt. So a clump of dirt is going to come with vegetables, not with fruits. So I guess it's specifically vegetables. So but once they're permater from vegetables, so then it's not a problem of hunger. So actually, theoretically, it's oretz. You see the regular year we could start the oretz. He shvis u'shar Shar Shnei Shavuot, Shemitah, and the rest of the 7 year cycle the same. You can make a leap year in any one of the years of the cycle, no differentiation. So in the Vilna we have a header, Tani Emar in the article edition, it's a little more elaborate. Tani Emar Shabashis Lomatzay Shis Shabashash Nishua Vibrua Raising Muberes. The Gra Takli Charatin say take this out. It's super redundant with what he said before. But in any event, whether you read it or not, the Ramon explains it. Ramon said, that you said initially when the years were appropriate, and the grain would get ripe already by the time of the Korban Omer. So therefore, we don't want to extend the time before you can eat for the new harvest. Now the years are not appropriate, and it takes longer for grain to develop, and only gets anyway ripe enough to eat, I guess, during the month after the Korban Omer. So then then it doesn't make a difference. You can even make a leap year in it says here but really they have a Matzoi Shvis, right? That you can make a leap year that's when the Tagan Charat in fact changes the Girsa, the Gra changes the Girsa to Matzoi Shvis. And you can make Matzoi Shvis to Shar Shnei Shavuot because Anyway, you're gonna have to wait. And Tani, we had a Bryce back tells us Shabbat Gamliel, Ibrua Motzoi Shvius Miyad. They made an Ibrior and invade Motzoi Shvius immediately. Now the Gemara asks now a very similar question to Gillian Ashash's question. Gillian Ashash says it's given to base the authority to make Ibrior, to make Ibor month, and it's the Shemitah itself, which is Mafkia. It's true Musumaisis, not Befka based it. And the Gemara's question is very similar. I'm going to say Imin Ador. If we allow from the fact that basically an extra month later Shemam Nuklum, we can't do anything for that. But it says Shomor's Chodesh Aviv. There's a special halacha. So it's not quite the same question. Gilshas saying they can make an Ibra Yor any year. It doesn't matter. Right? It's any time, sorry. It's even Mizidin, even if it's not appropriate. They're allowed to change the calendar, allowed to manipulate the calendar. He's saying a different question. He's saying, anyway, they're given a special authority of Shemar Skor Shavid, which overrides the fact that the Shemitah should only be 12 months, because if it's that year, Aviv is late, so then they have Aviv comes. It's only coming later. They had a year. They added Adar, so the spring comes out a month later. So it's a special din of Shemesh Chodesh Aviv. Okay, it's a bit very similar to the question going to Josh's question. So therefore, we have to look for a the way the Kalim says it came me the right tzarich. It's not just authorization; they'd have to do a Ibor. Maybe you could be right just to make the Josh's question now redundant with this question. I guess you would say, okay, maybe be right if it was at Basin's discretion, and they decide to make an Ibor, but they don't decide. They're mandated to make an Ibor year. So therefore, it's not right. It's not up to Africa, where it's up to them. So again, Leishma Min Klum, Email the Leishma Klum, Shamas Chalishav, Shabbat Chidusho. Paradam Rados, where we have a right, the Hefker base can exempt from Chumas and Maisers. So Gadish Lo Luka Tachtav. If you have a pile of grain, the Carbonate says, Masit Reish Perak Av the Peh, Bakh Birusha Misha Asa Vigdishas Amorim, Amorim Malcolm Echad. So you gather the sheaves and put them in one place. So there, Shadain lo lok tushamanim as a leket, but Danim not have the right, not get a chance to gather a leket, the stalks of grain which fell at the time of the harvest, which belong to them. So as more kon logos parshalanim, the anything which touches the ground goes to anim. It's kind of a knas. You say, oh, you shouldn't have put your gadish there. You should put your sheaves there, your pile, I guess. Not sheaves, your bundle of sheaves, pile of sheaves. You shouldn't put it there because you deprived any of leket. We're going to fine you. Everything that touches the ground is now considered everything leket. And it goes to him, and it's part of our meisers. Right? The Beishamai. That's going to be Beishamai. Because Beishamai holds that Hefker for Anim is Hefker. Beisil disagree. Beisil Anim, Hefker has made Hefker both for Anim and Ashir. There's no serious Hefker just for Anim. Okay, the who's most explicit here among the Mefarshim. Let's do the Takna Charatin. The Beishamai, it's going to be Beishamai. The Amar Hefker Anim Hefker. People don't see Pater and Meiser. Therefore, they can add on except for Meiser. But still, any Rashai lo sifli ten no goes but lanim to us like if they're a Meiser. According to Beis, so you can't do that. You can't just give it to Anim and say they're Pater and Meiser, and therefore they have to Meiser it. Because the guy say those are guys here, the Korban Ada actually. Anim Bashim no, that's I don't like that here, so. Let's go the Korban Ada gives on this one. I saying Beishamai, the Bram Case Hill, Anim Masim Bochlim, then Anim have to be Meiser because they can't make it after just Anim. Okay, so Amar Beisav, they said Shamanu should put them in Meisers. We heard it's exempt from Meiser Divrei HaKol. But everybody. Mishum Knas. Because of Knas. You know what? I'm going to renege again. I'm going to go like, I'm just going to read the Vilnius Gears. I like the Vilnius Gears here. What's wrong with the Vilnius Gears? I know I was going to change it. it says the top, the bottom of Gimel, top of Gimel base. Vam Rabbi Ami b'shem Lakish b'shamei. The Yika base Hillel Aniyim ochlim of Masrin. The Aniyim have to eat in the after Meiser because it's no such thing as Hefker just Aniyim. So that comes on Rabbi Yossi, and he says, you know what? Hefker based and Hefker is different. It's true. Normally, Hefker has to eat Fanim and Ashir. There's no such thing as Hefker just Fanim. And if you may Hefker just Fanim, it's null and void. It's not Hefker. No such thing. When you give tzedakah, Hefker means ownerless. No, you have no discretion who can get it. Everybody's be able to get it. Otherwise, not Hefker by definition. But Hefker based is different. Hefker, that's what he calls Mishum Knas. He says, only Rabbi Yossi Shmana should put them in Maisros. Why? Dibra call Mishum Knas. Because Hefker based on Tatan Chazdi explains very nicely. Dibra call based on Shnas Chachomim, that way Hefker based him. Knas Chachomim is like Hefker based him. The Afagam Shli Yikir Elanim, Hov Hefker Gomor. They have utter discretion. And Mikre Dino Kashar Hefker Lanim Hashem. It's all Hefker for everybody, both for the rich and for the poor. So there's it's interesting. Chakir the Varavram brings down famous Varavram about Hefker based and Hefker Nima Chuzadino, whether Hefker based and Hefker and Big Day Sheish Bavasi discussed it too. Whether Hefker based only works to be mafkia or also to be makna, right? And you can say for here it's a right, it also works to be makna because they're being mafkia for the original owner, and then they're being makna to the aniyim, right? And it's still part from Meisers. But I'm not sure you have to say that. Maybe you can get around it here and say that even if they just made hefker for aniyim, they were maknet to aniyim. They made hefker for aniyim. It's still that sufficient hefker. But in any event, you see that there's it's not giving you the makor for this, but you're seeing that Basin has this authority over Meisers, even if they're manipulating ownership and directing it towards somebody else. As long as there's this point in the middle, when it's this ownerless, even if later on Aniyim are going to be able to be Zachan and not Ashirim, nevertheless, that place in time which basically ownerless, that point, it's part is it from Trumas and Meisers, regardless of what happens next. So this, I think, you have to say no matter who you're learning like. Either basically makes it just have for Aniyim, and that's still considered ownerless, or basically makes it hefker, and then a mezakeh to aniyim, a two-stage process. But the point is, at some point, it's ownerless in terms of the fact that the original owner no longer has shackles to it, and therefore becomes part of from Chumas and Meisers. Okay, this is a very long shift to Yerushalmi. One can sink one's teeth into it and come up with all sorts of interesting ideas. But anyway, that's the idea that hefker is never considered type of hefker. And the partial shot is that Hefker just Fanim, and still Hefker, and you see a partnership from Trumas and Meisers because the original ownership is gone, and whatever base is doing afterwards, that's something else. The original ownership is gone, and at that point it loses its status of Chiv in Trumas and Meisers. Okay. I think that'll do it for today, because now we're on top of Amurav. Oh, and by the way, not good. It's the rest of it. There's Hanim Surim Oakland that we took out and put it. It's not even in the Bible, in the Vilna, it's not here. So, period. The article has the words, but it's in parentheses anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay, I guess I will stop here.